Welkom bij de podcast Dromen voor Volwassenen. Wil jij inspiratie opdoen om je dromen te bereiken? Luister dan de podcast en volg het gelijknamige Instagram kanaal om meteen op de hoogte te zijn van de nieuwste updates en extra materiaal. En als je vriend van de show wordt, dan heb je toegang tot exclusief materiaal en kom je als eerste meer te weten over de aankomende gasten en meer. Vergeet ook niet om de show 5 sterren te geven in je favoriete podcastspeler. Today will be different, but still the same. Welcome to the first episode of the podcast Dromen voor Volwassenen that is spoken in English. So welcome to my international listeners for the first episode of the podcast Let's Make Your Dreams Come True. My guest today is Chiara Talia. Chiara is known as a bird photographer. A few years ago she decided to go into a different direction in life. What made her change her life and start pursuing her dreams? Why does this involve bird photography? And what does a coot, a grab and a dove mean to her? But also, you will get to know Chiara a little bit better and get tips on how to turn your life around to get towards your dream life. And also, who is Giovanni? Chiara, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hello, Paul. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and also that this is the first episode in English.
Yes, it's also new for me. But like I also say to my Dutch listeners, if you want to try something, get somewhere, you just have to do it. So thank you for being the first in this exciting experience. Before we start talking about bird photography and your dream life, I think it's good to go back to the beginning. Where does your love for birds come from?
So my story is a bit of a weird one because I found birds relatively late in life. Basically, is just 4 years ago. So my story dates back to 2020 when I took my very first bird photo. So that was also the first photo that I've taken generally. So I wasn't a photographer before that. As you just mentioned, my life was really different a few years ago, but that's when I really started bird photography and it was really love at first sight. So the moment I took that very first photo of a European robin, I knew immediately something in my heart just started.
Yes, and that's I've seen the photo of the robin you're talking about, and I think it's very nice photo. I've also seen a lot of photos and made a few photos of robins myself. You say it's love at first sight, and it started like 4 years ago. But if you go further back, like to elementary school, how was your childhood? How was the time there?
Yes, that's a very interesting question, and I think indeed inside of me, I always had this deep connection with nature and animals. I grew up in the countryside. I'm originally from Italy, so I grew up in this very small village in southern Italy, and I spent my childhood literally being outside and playing outdoor and always surrounded by animals. And I think that's also the reason why I ended up going to study veterinary medicine, because I knew I really liked animals and veterinary medicine sounded like the natural thing to do. So that's what I have as a background. But then when I was in veterinary school, after graduation, I just realized that I wasn't really into, let's say, the classical job of a veterinarian in the sense of being a clinician, the doctor where you bring your dog or cat or pet to. And this is why after graduation, I just decided to go ahead with research. So I pursued also a PhD in medical sciences, and that's where I ended up being. And that's what I was actually doing. I was doing my PhD when I really met the robin.
Yes, and we'll go back to that story of your PhD in a few moments.
Mm-hmm.
First, I want to ask you a question that I want answered at the end of the episode. Suppose
Mm-hmm.
you talk to Chiara, like the child who is 6 years old. What
Mm-hmm.
advice would you like to give her in pursuing her
Mm-hmm.
dreams? And I do
Oh,
not want an
that's
answer right away.
okay. Okay, yeah, it's a very deep question. I'll think about it and give
Okay.
you the answer at the end.
Maybe you get the answer during the podcast. So
Yes,
when
I
we go,
will. Yes.
you talked about your childhood and how you were outdoor and like the animals were also surrounding you,
Mm-hmm.
but you for your education you started like the PhD or after your
Mm-hmm.
education. Um, what made you decide to follow that PhD?
Mm-hmm. So what happened is that during veterinary school, of course, before graduation, I had to also work on my first individual research project, and I decided to do my research project in toxicology because that was a subject that was also part of the veterinary curricula. Because toxicology was something that interested me. This idea that you can have chemicals and they can have an impact on the health not only of people but also of animals and also generally in the environment. So I did this small research project and I really liked it. So I enjoyed the idea of conducting research, and I also pretty much enjoyed the subject, so toxicology. And that's why then I decided to go ahead and I just started looking for PhDs in toxicology basically. And I also just wanted to leave Italy. So I found this PhD in Scotland and I applied for it. I got into the PhD program and I went to do this PhD that was again in toxicology as a subject.
Okay, so you found something that interested you, and you started
Mm-hmm.
pursuing that particular subject.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, uh, if I'm not mistaken, your PhD hasn't ended yet, right?
No, no,
Or
no, it is. It is.
okay,
Thankfully, it
sorry.
is. No, no, that's okay. That's okay. No, no, I completed my PhD actually during COVID. So yeah, it's been already a while.
Yes, and how because I I decided not to pursue a PhD dream.
Mm-hmm.
I also did like a master education at the university regarding health sciences,
Mm-hmm.
but I finished it, but I found out pretty fast that the PhD life isn't for me.
Mm-hmm.
To
Mm-hmm.
speak like this,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
yeah.
I'm curious. What made it obvious for you that it would be your life, that it would be suited for you?
I think that it's all about the thing that as when I was still an undergrad, I really enjoyed doing research. So I think that the PhD was kind of the natural continuation of that, going into research and trying to get into academia. Also because I have to say that back then I was also still thinking I could see myself um, in academia and also teaching, because that's something that I always thought I would do in my future life at a certain point. So it just felt really natural. Also because I just generally as a person, I really enjoy the part where you just study, when you look for information and then you try to summarize information, or you as a scientist you kind of create new information. So all that process, which is basically just scientific research, is something that I enjoyed. So I thought that a PhD was a good choice, at least to try. Then, of course, what happened is that during the PhD, by the end of it, so when I was approaching the final part of my PhD, I realized that that wasn't indeed the life that I wanted for me.
Yes, and well, like I said, I also did like the university life, and a lot of my classmates then are well promoted. They have. I'm looking at a few of the books they wrote about their PhDs. During your PhD, you found out it isn't for you, and before that, you thought, well, it is for me. What I'm curious, what was the thing that made you change your mind?
I don't think that there is a single aspect to it. I think that for certain things in life, you have to try before you know. So I always tell myself I don't have regrets about, let's say, what I've done previously in my life. Back then I thought that doing a PhD and maybe the academic life was the one that I wanted, and I just could have not known if that wasn't the case, if I would have not gone there. So I'm still grateful that I tried it, and I did it. And eventually I just thought that the life in academia is very peculiar, if I can use this word. There's lots of pressure that comes from doing research, and you have to be quick to publish before anyone else does it. And there's also often a chase for funding, because there's, in many fields, there's just not enough money to conduct all the type of researches that you want to do. And I feel that I just didn't fit well within the overall system. So it's not that there was a single aspect that convinced me, like, no, Chiara, this is not for you. It was really just a very general thing, like, I don't fit in this system. And what happened is that basically I didn't realize it, let's say, in an easy way. What happened is that during the last part of my PhD, I actually started to feel pretty unwell, and struggling with my mental health. So there was kind of an alarm bell that started ringing in the form of an anxiety disorder. And when that alarm sounded, I was like, okay, I need to take a step back and understand what's going on. And I think that what's going on was just literally my body and my mind trying to tell me, Chiara, you're not on the path that is right for you right now.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful thing how you said it. I also think that it's well, not the most nice experience you can have, but I think it's very good that you talk about this, because we'll talk about it a little bit more in a few moments, because I want to grab back to the thing you said, that you experienced in PhD life the pressure from outside, like to get funding, to get a lot of papers out, so you can be the one who published the paper, so you can make a name for yourself. And while you were saying that, I was thinking, well, during my education and the masters I did, there was also something of a pressure within the education, within the course. How was that for you? Was there some kind of pressure, or was it because you were so motivated that you didn't even see it as pressure?
That's also a very interesting point. I have to say that I definitely didn't feel an external pressure. on the other side, I now that I'm a few years along the road, and after lots of reflection of myself and also many therapy sessions, I came to realize that there was lots of pressure that I put on myself. So also during my education, I've always been the very typical good student, always getting the good grades. I was like the first person in my cohort to graduate. However, what I also knew pretty clearly back then is that although I enjoyed studying, I didn't have the same kind of strong drive as most of my fellow students. So what happens
Hmm.
is that, of course, in veterinary medicine, many people who go there have really a dream of being a veterinarian. Being a veterinarian is kind of a very common, I think, childhood dreams for
Hmm.
many.
I think
Um,
that is.
and so when you're at vet school, I was literally surrounded by people who had that dream very clear in their mind and in their heart. And when I was there, what I knew is that even if I was a very good student, even if I graduated with good grades and whatever, I knew that I didn't have the same dream as the others. And this wasn't a nice feeling to have. I was kind of envious of them, because I was wondering, why am I lacking this? I came here to study this because I thought I really like animals, but now I'm
Hmm.
here and studying all of these, and I feel this is not what I want to do as a job. This is not what I want to be. So I ended up just going with the flow or going into research, because I was telling myself, Chiara, the only thing that you're good at is studying. And I'm pretty organized as a person, and I don't mind reading. I don't mind writing and stuff. So I said that's just the only thing that maybe I can do is going into research. So this is a bit of the background there, but I don't think that was really external pressure back then. It was more like of a feeling coming from the inside, that
Hmm.
that wasn't my place. And back then I just didn't know what my place was, so I kind of just went with the flow and ended up maybe going in a direction that wasn't really what resonated with myself, and it took a bit longer to really then find my dream.
Yeah, but no regrets, just lessons learned.
Yeah, no, absolutely no regrets.
And if you put the two timelines we talked about next to each other, like your PhD life and your
Mhm.
childhood, how do they overlap, or are they just completely different worlds you were living in?
I think that they were they were really different. Obviously, when I remember when I was a child, I just remember this sense of freedom coming from being outdoor and really being in nature and just being with my animals, and also just I think that what I was really also enjoying of my childhood is also the possibility of expressing my more creative and sensitive side. And that's something that I feel I kind of lost growing up, because of course, as you also know, when you go into a career that it's more science based, we work with data, we work
Hmm.
with numbers, and everything is evidence based, and I love that. I love the logic. I love to be critical and everything, but I kind of then lost along the way all that really spontaneous creativity that I really had as a child and was an important part of me. So, what I also tell myself is that it's kind of growing up, I then put myself into this box of like, Chiara, you're only good at studying. That's the only thing that you can do. You're this very logical person, pretty rigid with your mindset. That's the only thing that you can do. And I feel that that was really the breaking point, because at the end of the day, that was not the reality. There was also another part of myself that I just kind of lost along the way. And I feel that then during the PhD, I think that I just reached the maximum point, and then it was, that part has to find a way to come outside. And this is exactly what happened.
Yeah, like you put a lot of pressure on that other side that's inside you, and when the pressure just building up, it just erupts like a volcano, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
happened.
Mm-hmm.
And like you talked of your said earlier, that was like in the final part of your PhD, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what were the first signs that you were experiencing?
Um, s-
Experiencing?
Yes, so well, basically, I started having these mostly anxiety attacks. So I also experienced not that many panic attacks, but it was mostly this kind of very general and pervasive sense of anxiety that I had throughout the day. I want to say almost constant, and it was worse when I was at work. So when I was at my PhD, and I started noticing that I really had physical symptoms, the classical physical symptoms associated with anxiety. So kind of shortness of breath, like feeling something like a weight on my chest.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I also used to feel my muscle really tense. Sometimes I was really kind of shaking because of the anxiety. So it was physical too. And then of course I would say that the worst part was the internal experience of anxiety. So this feeling that something terrible is about to happen, the feeling that you can't really relax anymore, you can't let go, and always feeling on edge. So it was, I would say, it was a very, by the books type of experience of what anxiety is. And then I have to say that very quickly, after I realized I had these very clear symptoms of anxiety, I asked for help very quickly. I think that very immediately I knew something was really off. I wasn't recognizing myself anymore. So I said I need to ask for help. So I immediately went to therapy.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good thing you're talking about this. And
Mm-hmm.
well, I also think it's a good thing when you can't do it yourself, you search for help.
Mm-hmm.
Um, do you think in when reflecting on the total of your PhD period,
Mm-hmm.
like in the end, it erupted and you had the anxiety attacks and the uh, feeling that you were constantly on edge.
Mm-hmm.
When I put my healthcare care hat on, I'm thinking, well, this girl, or this woman, you're not a girl anymore. Uh, um, she is very stressed out,
Mm-hmm.
constant under pressure, like we
Mm-hmm.
talked about earlier, not only from the outside but also the inside,
Mm-hmm.
like shortness of breath, maybe also a high blood pressure, tense muscles. Um, I can imagine that that's something that, well, the threshold of your body, when it's above the threshold, it erupts. Like that
Mm-hmm.
was the last part of your PhD. But years
Mm-hmm.
before that, were there any signs that you weren't in the place you should be in?
Um, you know what? I don't think so. Because the first part was mostly a very positive experience. Also, just because it was such a new experience for me, because I it was my first I changed country. It wasn't my first international experience, because before that I already had lived for 1 year. When I was still studying veterinary medicine, I went on Erasmus, so I had already lived abroad. But this was different. It was a big change for me to move to another country. So in this case, I left Italy to move to Scotland. So it's a bit that first honeymoon phase, let's say, when
Hmm.
everything is kind of new and you get to live all these new experiences, and many things are very exciting because you have to discover many things. So I think that first part was pretty nice, because I was just really enjoying the possibility of living this life, which was so different from my previous life. So if I have to think about it, there were no clear signs. So I didn't predict how things would have turned out a couple of
No.
years later.
Yeah, I think if you could have predicted it, you didn't pursue the PhD life.
Yes, that's true.
And well, like you said, the last part of your PhD life was the bad period, the dark period, saying to say so. What made you decide that you did want to finish your PhD?
So the when I was really at the, let's say, at the peak of unwellness, so when it was already also before asking for help, I really just had to take a step back. So I think that for over a month, I didn't work anymore at my PhD. So I took a full break because I
Hmm.
feel that I really needed it. And then what happened is that I started psychotherapy, which was very helpful. And then only only a couple of months later, I took my first bird photo. So I
And w-
feel that
Did you
I
finish
start.
your PhD? Sorry to interrupt you, but did you finish your PhD when you took the photo of the robin or
No, no,
not?
no. The PhD finished later on. So
Okay.
back then I basically just had started my last year of the PhD, let's say.
Hmm.
So I definitely had to take a break from it for a bit, because I just couldn't function anymore. So I couldn't work anymore. But then what happened is that, thanks to the of course thanks to the therapy, and after the break, and then also thanks to the new
Yourself.
activity that I started, like photography, I realized, I can get better. So I started to get the feeling. I kind of got away from that idea that everything was not anymore under my control. So what was really dreadful for me in that period is that it looked like I wasn't in control anymore of my life, of my own mind. But then
Hmm.
with time, I learned that I could be better. Of course, it was a very hard process. It wasn't easy. I had to learn, techniques and tools, and to learn how to get out of some very negative mental states. I had to learn which were the activities that could make me feel better. But I kind of decided to work on it and
Hmm.
not make it just defeat me, let's say. So I started feeling better. I started functioning again. And this is why I decided to anyway go back to my PhD, also because I was kind of close to finishing up. And also, as a person, I'm really determined, and normally when I start something, I also finish it, even if even if it's very hard at times. So it took some time, and definitely it wasn't easy, but I decided to keep going. And indeed, I was able at the end to complete my PhD. And the thing is that at the end, I'm also very much grateful to it, although it wasn't a really positive experience at the end, because I also tell myself that if maybe I would have not been so miserable during those months, maybe I would have never decided to take that camera and go to that park and take that first photo that then made me a bird photographer. So I like to see the silver lining also in that very bad period. And I'm also then grateful that I was able to complete the PhD.
Yeah, it's like the yin yang, the bad of the good in the bad period. Yeah,
Absolutely.
and when you to create a timeline, you finish your PhD a few months after you took the first photograph of a bird.
Yes, that's right.
I can imagine that the period you were having, though that sounds bad, the period you were living in at the time, like finishing your PhD, but also starting your new dream life of bird photography. How did you manage to cope with both things, with both dreams?
Well, I would say that during that period, so I would say during that first year of like from the moment I took that first photo, so 2020, being a bird photographer wasn't my dream. At that point, bird photography was just an activity that I enjoyed with all my heart. It was an activity that I knew really, really helped me finding peace. And it just gave me the right motivation also to work at my PhD, because I knew that then, in the weekends, I could just go outside and go look for birds and take some photos. So I would say that in that period, I wasn't thinking at bird photography being a job at all. It was an activity that I basically just discovered myself. I was an absolute beginner at it. That was really just the year that I spent learning about birds and photography, because I am a self-taught photographer. Before that, I never cared about birds at all. So everything was a new discovery. So I didn't know how to recognize birds. So I had to learn their names and where they lived. And of course, as a scientist, I also really wanted to study birds. So that first year was more like I'm going to finish my PhD and work in my PhD, knowing that now I have a hobby on the side that really, really fills my heart with joy and gives me happiness. So I think that that was really important because it just introduced an element of balance in my life that I think I was lacking before. And also, all of these happened. During COVID. So that was also the year of COVID, which was also not another, it was yet another, struggle to add in the mix. So I'm also just very grateful looking back at that year that I was able to complete the PhD while starting a new hobby and surviving COVID, just like every other human being on the planet.
Yeah, it was a strange time, to say the
Yes, it
least.
was the
Yes.
strangest of it all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and while you were talking, I wrote down finding balance, and that was your conclusion also, that bird photography helped you finding balance within
Mhm.
your academic life.
Mhm.
And well, that also resonates with your childhood when you were always outside. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of things, when people get burnouts or anxiety or other nasty things, to say, I don't
Mhm.
know the exact word, but that being outside, away from screens, away from pressure, just living in the moment and
Mhm. Mhm.
experiencing everything around you, that is key in maintaining the balance in life.
Mhm.
Because
Totally.
and people say, the work hard, play hard, but
Mhm.
that's also, if you work hard, you have to relax hard.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, and well, you said like 2020 you started taking your camera with bird photographing,
Mm-hmm.
and what I heard in your story is that you, um, or earlier you said you always love to study, and the scientist within you wants to know more, get more
Mm-hmm.
information, study, learn. That
Yes.
these are key elements within you as a person that
Mm-hmm.
helped you in college, in your PhD, but also within this hobby of bird photography.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, what was the moment when you decided, well, okay, I love taking photos of birds. Maybe I can pursue a dream within this. Maybe I can make my work out of it, for instance.
So also these kind of really evolved with time. So it's not something like a moment thing. Like one day I woke up and I said, Chiara, now this is your dream. It's something that really grew as a dream with time, and it took time for this idea just to be formed inside of my mind. But then it took also quite a while for me to accept this as a dream, if this makes sense, because it was very scary. On one side, I kind of always as I mentioned before, I kind of also always been jealous of people that had such a strong drive for something. And then I feel that I found the thing, but it took a lot of courage for me to accept that now this was my dream, because it was really scary at the beginning. I think that maybe one of the, if I have to identify pivotal moments in all of this, maybe the first one would be at a point I was approached by Canon Belgium, and
Mm-hmm.
they selected me as young talent for the year 2021, I believe. and
That's nice.
in and yeah, it was nice. And the nicest thing is that as a young talent, I was asked to give a presentation at a photo fair that they have in Brussels.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the first time that I was able to talk about my photography in front of real people, because before that I was just starting to share my work on Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was really nice, because that moment maybe just planted the seed that maybe that could be my dream, because it really felt great, the idea of talking about my photography and showing what I was doing and just sharing what was giving me so much joy,
Mm-hmm.
was something that really was something that really gave me a lot back. And I started thinking, maybe this can be my dream. And then from there it just evolved with time. So from just sharing my photos on Instagram, I started also to share what I was learning about birds and about photography, because I was like, I don't want just to show photos to people. I mean, it's nice, of course, as a photographer, you have that ultimate goal of taking a nice photo. But my point is that I just don't want to share photos for the sake of it, because it's something aesthetically beautiful. I want to share stories of birds, and I want to share my story, what I'm doing as a bird photographer, what I'm learning along the way, what are my challenges, what are my struggles, because as a beginner bird photographer, you face lots of struggles and lots of challenges. And I felt like, sometimes you go on social media and everything you see are these beautiful photos, and then very easily, I think, at least people who are kind of very critics with themselves, as myself, you can fall into the trap of just wondering, oh, why does everyone looks like taking amazing photos and I can't? So my goal at that point was like, I want to share the experience of a beginner photographer with all the challenges, not just sharing the wonderful results. Because, yeah, maybe I take good photos, but they are just a small part of the actual total experience of being a bird photographer. And also because bird photography for me doesn't mean only taking an aesthetically nice bird photo. Bird
Hmm.
photography for me means to be outside, to connect with nature, to be present. And it is about just feeling connecting to oneself and to nature. So I said, I don't see this way of communication on social media. I don't see other people sharing this message. So I said, I can be the one sharing this message. So it started in this way, and then it kind of grew. People started to follow my account. I started to receive questions from people about asking for help about their photography, people asking for feedback on their photos. And I realized, you know what, I love doing this, because bird photography is maybe an activity which is pretty lonely, I must say, or at least I
Hmm.
do it in a very lonely way. Most of the time I just by myself, but I felt I also just needed to share it with others. So that was that basically became my dream, not only to become bird photographer, but to share everything I know and my story with other people.
Yeah, and if I'm just summarizing it, you you want or you said earlier that you would love to go into teaching and developing people, but you thought it
Hmm.
would be within the academic structure. But now, given your path, you think or you're feeling that bird photography is your way of teaching and helping people develop, and
Yes,
also
that's right.
developing for yourself. And
Hmm.
um, we made, I think, this appointment for the podcast like a few months ago, I think.
Hmm.
And earlier in a Dutch episode of the podcast, I talked with Arjan Dwarshuis. I don't know if you know him, but he's the world record holder of bird watching.
Oh,
And one,
wow. Okay.
yeah, if you look for the big year of
Okay.
him,
Hmm.
I can send you the link and also put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he saw, uh, I think, almost 7,000 different species of birds in 1 year.
Oh, amazing. Oh,
Yeah.
God.
Yes, and so when I talked with him and I saw his passion, I was like, okay, well, maybe I should also look around a little bit more to
Hmm.
see, like, with our birds. And photography was also a hobby of mine and still is. And I
Hmm.
thought, well, when we're gonna do this podcast, there's one thing I can do to prepare myself, and that's making photos of birds. So,
That's right. Yes.
like the photo of the kestrel I sent you, that was like the
Hmm.
first time we connected, and that
Hmm.
was also, I made it in January this year. It was like very
Hmm.
cold, and well, you thought it was during golden hour, but it was like 12 o'clock in the mid of the day.
Hmm.
So that's also something. The story doesn't match the photo, like you also said. It's not just the end project,
Hmm.
but I can I know, like, I walked behind a sign to make sure the kestrel did not see me, so I could
Hmm.
get close enough, because yeah, well, I don't have like the big objective, the big lens on my camera that
Hmm.
help me. I have to go physically closer to the bird to make the good
Hmm.
photo. um, and I thought, you know what, if besides making the photos of birds, which is just a hobby, uh, I can also try. Well, like you said, I opened an Instagram account in 2020.
Hmm.
2021, you were speaking at the Canon Young Talent, or you were the Canon Young Talent, and you were speaking to people about your story.
Hmm.
Um, I also made a Instagram page with my bird photos, just to see what happens if you just put it out there. Just put your photos
Hmm.
that you're proud of out there. And for some reason, it generates uh, a lot of like-minded people who also
Yes.
share their
Mm-hmm.
photos, and it's like a big community. But
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I also saw within your story, before you had the Instagram account, you just showed your photos to family and friends.
Yes, yes. I was doing that mostly on. I have also kind of a private account, so that was
Hmm.
something where I only had family and friends. So that's where I started because as a photographer, I think that the instinct is to show your photos with people to people. So that's what I started doing. Of course, the most immediate people that you think about are your family and friends. So that's
Yes.
how I started. But then, I think that also when you have a strong passion at a point, I think it's also natural that you want to connect, as you just said, with like-minded people. So I was just missing that at that point, also because let's remember it was COVID time, so there was no possibility of connecting with real people, let's say. In So the natural thing was, okay, I'm going to look for my new tribe. This is why I decided to open a new account only focused on photography. Back then, actually called it nature photography because
Hmm.
I thought, maybe I will also take photos of other natural elements, like not only birds, but maybe also other animals. Maybe I'll also take, I don't know, natural landscape photos. But then soon enough along the road, I realized that no, my true passion just lies in birds. So then I changed the name to Birds Only.
Yes. Well, I think it's a good choice, and I also love taking photos of birds. So in
Hmm.
that case, welcome to our tribe.
Yes.
Um, and I can, well, I'm wondering because you said a lot, and I will talk a little bit or ask a little bit more about your road towards your success right now. But
Hmm.
I can also imagine that you had a few bumps down the road.
Hmm.
How did you cope with these setbacks regarding your bird photography?
So I think that the the largest, the biggest setback that I had was just basically myself. So coming to terms with myself that indeed that was my dream. So it was like a bit of an internal fight. On one side, there was this part of me which kind of knew very deeply that I found finally my purpose. That bird photography was really the activity for me because through bird photography I could kind of express all my parts for the first time in my life. That was really a way where in which all my parts could just be expressed. So not just the scientific part, but also the creative part and being in nature and feeling connected. On the other side, accepting to kind of leave a very um, how can I say, to leave a secure job
Hmm.
and also a good job was hard because of course after doing my PhD I looked for a job because I had to I had to sustain myself.
You have
So
to get money.
yes, of course. So I found a job and I basically, so I moved away from university because, as we discussed, it was very clear that academia wasn't for me. So I
Hmm.
moved to work in a private company as a researcher. So I was still in science, I was still working as a scientist, but this time in a private company. And that really helped in terms of the work-life balance. So I feel the overall rhythm was way better than what I experienced during my PhD. And overall, I was in a very good place with myself. And I was just doing, at that point, I was just doing bird photography on the side. So basically, every single minute of my free time was devoted to, again, expand my knowledge about birds, practice photography, or traveling to visit new places and find new birds. So those years were very important years for me because this job anyway gave me that sense of security. So I could just then grow as a photographer. Um, so I'm very grateful for it because photography and especially bird photography requiring lots of equipment is a pretty expensive hobby. So I'm really grateful that back then I had a good job that allowed me just to go ahead with my hobby. But then
Yes.
with the years passing, there was this there was this awareness that was growing inside of me that was like, yes, you can keep your job, you can stay in this job, and it's a good job, and you're kind of okay with it. So it wasn't that it was a stressful period. But when deep inside that that's not something that you're supposed to do. So that's how I started feeling with time, because I started to have all these ideas, like I wanted to visit other places. I had all these projects in my mind about new activities to help people and organizing activities for my community online. And time was just not enough, basically, because of course I had a full-time job, and during my free time I also had just to to
You also had a
relax and rest.
full-time job.
Yes, so it was just I was really squeezing myself to get to do all the things that I really wanted to do, like photography, and then learning, and then putting out the content. I started in that time. I also started to make videos, so of course the time required was much more than just editing photos and everything. So
Mhm.
at a point, I just realized, I can't really do all of this because it's a bit like having two full-time jobs, but in reality, I don't have the time for two full-time jobs. So I lived this life for a while, and it was kind of intense because I was literally spending all the weekend just working at birth photography or at my account or for videos or for my community. But then I said, Chiara, you have again to take a step back, because then the risk was that I would have gone again into burnout. So, and I promised myself when that happened back a few years before, I promised myself that I would have not let that happen again. So that's when I said I had to take a decision. And I know deep inside of my heart, that bird photography and teaching is what I really want to do. And if I want to make this dream come true, I need more time. I need all the time. So I decided to quit my previous job and my previous life, let's say.
Yeah, and be a guest in the podcast, of course.
Yes, exactly. So I did the right thing. So I could be a guest in your podcast.
Yes, exactly. And if I just summarize your story, I think, like everything you told me so far, there are three main subjects that are freedom, stability, and safety. Like the freedom to do the thing you love, but
Mhm.
also the stability to live your life the way you want to live it.
Mhm.
And like you said, the you worked besides your bird photography side hustle, freelance
Mhm.
business to say the least. So you could invest in the right equipment. But
Mhm.
when you're settled with those things, you ask yourself, should I keep continuing working and like the freelance business of bird watching, or should I make a choice to go with bird watching,
Mhm.
bird photography? But also safety of knowing what you want to do, but take the leap of faith,
Mhm.
um, and choosing for the bird photography instead, like what many people do. They choose to stay within their work because it creates some kind of safety, but they're not happy. So in the long run, they get bitten in the ass, to say the least, because they do not do the thing they love and what they want to do, but they just do it for the wrong reasons. And if I'm looking at everything you said, I've got like a lot of notes because you talk with a lot of passion, but also like the things you say, they inspire me, and I also hope the listeners to pursue their dreams. And if I may summarize, you have the determination and the perseverance to invest in yourself and create your own dream life with the freedom, stability, and the safety, because you made the choices in finding the balance you want in life.
Yes.
And one thing that also is, I think, important is first you started comparing with others, but when you stopped doing that, you created a whole new vision for yourself in what your life should be. And you keep learning and developing yourself, but what people must not forget is that it takes time. Because like what you said, 2020, COVID came, you found a new passion with bird photography. And now 4 years later, you work like solely in bird photography. And I do not know a lot of people who want to do something and say, well, you know what? I'll start today. And it's okay if it takes me 4 years to get where I want to be. Most people want to get instant success.
Yes, so, that's indeed a tricky thing. But indeed, it takes time. I think that also this is a very important message to share with people, because whenever, especially nowadays with all social media, I mean, I do love social media. I am on there, but I'm also really aware of how fake sometimes the image people share on social media is. So I think it's very important for people to realize that indeed there's almost never is instant success. I think that as humans, we are a bit conditioned nowadays just to think about what's the easiest way to get to a certain goal. But the reality is that in most cases, I would say there's no easy way. But if I can give just a very broad advice, I think that when it comes to dreams, the first thing is to have an open heart to accept it, or at least that's something that I needed. I know many people already have a very strong passion and they knew already, but maybe some other people now are listening and maybe they have not yet found their dream. And I would tell them, that's okay. I found my dream when I was I was 20, I was 28. I felt really old. But sometimes also just to find a dream, it takes time, because maybe you just have to live certain life experiences and you need to grow in order to be wise enough to see that dream. And then the other step is the moment one has a dream is also finding the courage to pursue it, knowing that sometimes it's a very long and bumpy road. But if the dream is really true to one's heart, I think that it's totally possible to achieve it.
Yeah, we due to the internet connection, we stopped our cameras, but I'm nodding all the way. I think you've summarized it perfectly. In our introduction, I also talked about a few water birds like grebes and coots. Could you tell me what those birds mean for you?
So, for me personally, I feel I feel a strong connection with water as an element.
Hmm.
And also here is something that I kind of already knew all my life, and now that I have birds in my life, it's really funny to see how I am naturally drawn towards all the bird species that are related to water habitats. So that's most of the photos that I take are actually of birds in the water.
Hmm.
So being it's freshwater like lakes, polders, but also seabirds. And that's also where I spend most of my time. So just by walking around the water. And there is just this deep fascination for these birds, and with them being around the water, I don't know if it's just the idea of water being something that reflects, or water just transmitting this sense of calmness, but at the same time the idea that something flows. It's just something that really resonates with me, and this is why most of my favorite birds are actually birds that live around water. So, for
Hmm.
example, you mentioned the grebes, and grebes are just stunning birds. Of course, there are different
Indeed.
grebe species here around Belgium and in the Netherlands. My favorite one being the great crested grebe. They are so elegant, and I literally the highlight of the spring for me is literally just to see the courting display of the great crested grebe. So for all the listeners, if you have no idea of what I'm telling, just go on YouTube and look for great crested grebe courtship display, and you will be surprised because these birds literally dance on the water, and it's such a spectacle to see with your eyes. And I have a dream within a dream, let's say, because
Mhm.
I do hope that in my life I will be able to travel the world in order to see all the grebe species of the world. Because there's many species. The ones that are in Europe, I already see them all, but there are not many. So I need to go a bit further to see also the other grebes. But that's another, let's say, small dream that I also have now.
Yeah, something you can see yourself in 5 to 10 years of doing.
Yeah, maybe even more. It will take maybe even more. Some of them live in pretty remote places, so it requires a really specific trip to get to them. But um, you never know. If there's something that I learned in the past years, is that sometimes life is really surprising. I mean, before January 2020, I I could have never even thought that I could become a bird photographer. So now I'm much more open to the idea that literally everything can happen in life. So I'm sure that there will be surprises. So who knows? Maybe I will also achieve this dream.
Yes, well, let's hope so. And if
Yes.
somebody who listens to to this podcast thinks, well, I also want to start photographing birds, what advice do you have for that person?
So for anyone who wants to start bird photography right now, the first advice is to go around a place that you can reach very easily. So this can also just mean literally your garden, or if you have a local park. Sometimes I feel like people think, oh, to become a bird photographer, I need to take a flight and go to Costa Rica or fly to Africa. That's really not the case. The beauty of birds is that they are literally everywhere around us, and all it takes is to just change your eyes and learn to see differently, because they are around. It takes some training to find them and to recognize them. But my biggest advice would be just to pick a place that you can visit many times, because that's really important to familiarize with almost the individual bird. So if you really start paying attention and um, visiting the same place over and over again, you will really get to know the individual birds, and you will also familiarize with another very important concept in nature, which is the idea of cycles. So, of course, with birds, you get to see the passing seasons, and sometimes maybe in a certain place, the birds that you find there in spring are different from the birds that you find there in winter. So, to grow as a bird photographer, I think it's really fundamental to really get in tune with nature and learn about birds and what they do and when they arrive and how they live their life. Because only in that way, then you can hope to get a photo that is good enough to really represent their beauty.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is start small. And
Yes.
right now it's the October 4th, so winter is coming. And if you have a garden, maybe create a feeding spot for birds just to make it easy for yourself to see what kind of birds will come to your garden. And then you have like one spot you can practice your bird photography.
Yeah, but also sometimes just looking around the streets. Even for people living in a city, I mean, I live in a large city, so I'm not surrounded by nature, but still I can do bird watching literally from my window. And I think that that's really the great thing about bird photography, is that is so accessible to everyone. So you don't need to travel, you don't need to spend lots of time. You can literally just spend a few minutes. Of course, with a few minutes, maybe you will not get a super great photo. But again, I think that at least for the way I live bird photography, the core idea is that I spend some time observing birds. Then the photo kind of comes second.
And if you would like give an indication, how much time does it take you to get like a picture or a photo you like?
Oh, that's a hard question, because there are so many. When it comes to bird photography, something that everyone has to accept, and I think that every bird photographer has to realize really soon in their experiences, that not many things are under our control. And I think this is also something that really helped with my anxiety, learning how to let go of control and accepting that I can't control it all. And bird photography is a wonderful activity to really practice this new attitude of accepting that things just don't go the way you planned. Because, of course, you can't control if a bird will be there, you can't control the weather. And these are two major elements for a bird photo, at least. So, in terms of time, there are certain sessions. So for a session, I mean, for example, if I go out for a sunrise, I might go and take photos for maybe just the time of sunrise. So it's quite a brief time slot, let's say, and get a few photos that I'm happy with. But at the same time, there might be weeks during which I go out for many sessions, and I don't take photos that I consider good enough. So it really changes, also simply because all the elements around me changes. So sometimes it's like there's not the right weather. Sometimes maybe it's just me lacking inspiration, because photography is an artistic form. So one can also has to accept that sometimes we're just not inspired enough to take good photos. And then it also depends on the birds. There will be some subjects that maybe I like to work more with, and then maybe those subjects I for a period of time I don't find them. So it really depends. So I think it's almost impossible to answer this question like giving a number. So for
Yeah,
once,
but
go
also
ahead.
I think what you're saying is it's not like, oh, I want to make a photo of a bird, and snap, it's done, and you get the perfect picture. You have to invest your time in creating the photo, the opportunities of getting there to make the good photos.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also not only the time, but also the knowledge, looking at the behavior of the birds, knowing where they are sitting in. I know that I like beginning of the year, I went to a park in a city near my city because
Mm-hmm.
I saw online that there are owls. And
Mm-hmm.
I haven't photographed owls before, so I thought, well, I'm looking at this website and they keep saying that there are owls there, so I'll go
Mm-hmm.
there. And
Mm-hmm.
first time I went there, I looked and I looked and I looked, but I didn't see an owl.
Mm-hmm.
And in the weeks after that, I still saw people who said, well, they are there. So I just went
Mm-hmm.
again, and I did saw a kingfisher, which was
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Nice.
Yeah, I was happy with that one. But
Mm-hmm.
then a person who saw me photographing said, well, did you spot the kingfisher? I said, yes, but I'm still looking for the owls. Oh, I know where they are. So I went with this guy and he showed me
Mm-hmm.
where the owls were.
Oh, great.
So yeah, I was happy with that because I
Mm-hmm.
literally walked past them like 4 or 5 times, but I didn't see them. So sometimes you have to find the right people, like you said earlier, that want to help you and that can
Mm-hmm.
help you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yes.
So first, it's knowledge, it's experience, it's knowing what you have to do to create a good photo and practicing
Mm-hmm.
your photography, but also
Mm-hmm.
getting yourself set up for success.
Mm-hmm.
And like getting set up for success, we have one important question about the introduction that people want to know. Who is Giovanni?
So Giovanni is a bit of a mythical figure at this point. Giovanni is a common wood pigeon. So for anyone who's not a bird watcher, it's a very common bird that you find also in cities nowadays, but literally everywhere. So it's really widespread. It's a bulky pigeon, so it's larger than the typical rock pigeon that you find in the cities. So it's the one a bit larger. It has a white patch around the neck, just to know, just to describe to the listeners, because I'm sure that everyone listening has seen a common wood pigeon.
Yeah,
So
I
what
think
happened
so.
is, yes, I'm sure 100%, but many times, when it comes to birds, we just overlook them. At least it's what I was doing before. And then then the moment I became a bird watcher, I was like, oh my goodness, there are so many birds. How it is possible that I miss all these birds in my life? But anyway, coming back to Giovanni. I just started to on social media. I just started to share stories showing this common wood pigeon that was literally coming every day in front of my window. So as I mentioned before, I do bird watching literally from my flat in the middle of the city. It's a promise that I have also done to myself, that every day I spend some time looking outside, looking at birds, even if some days maybe I don't have time to go out, or because I'm working, I always try to look for birds. And there was this common wood pigeon, and staying always at the same spot, just in front of my window during the same times of the day. And it kind of just became a character that I started sharing about on my social media, because I think that also the nice thing about birds and watching birds is this fact that in one sense they are always around, and they can really help you feel a bit less alone, if that makes sense. And this really, there is this reassurance that no matter what's going on in your life, or how hard things, you can always just go out, or look outside of the window, and you can see your Giovanni out there. So for me, Giovanni is just this kind of this friend. I call him my neighbor. He is my neighbor in one sense. He lives in my neighborhood anyway. But it just became kind of a symbol of what bird means to me, and how they can really be, for as small as a moment, that can really become a moment of joy in everyday life.
Yeah, and also a sign that you do not have to travel far to get a good photograph of a bird.
Yeah, I do have a few good photos of Giovanni. Yes, there is a nice one when he came in that case. He came really on my balcony, and it was a very chilly morning. So there was the sun against us. So I was able to capture, and it kind of yawned. So it opened its bill, and in the photo you can see its breath. So it's something that I always thought that I wanted to take a photo of, bird's breath or bird song. So really the air that is that's put out. And it was really nice, and it was really cool to photograph that literally from inside my flat. I just very slowly opened the window, so I didn't have also the glass between my lens and Giovanni itself. But it was really cool that I took that photo literally from inside my flat.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be quite a hard experience to create a good shot.
No, it's not, absolutely. I mean, many of the photos that I like the most that I've taken until now are photos that I've taken literally in the pond next to the place where I live, like 10 minutes away, with my car. Obviously, I also travel for bird photography, so I do also have photos that I've taken in other countries, because some species do not occur here. But on the other hand, I'm extremely happy that so many photos that I'm really proud of were taken just in the city, basically.
Yeah. Looking at the future, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years?
So I think that I definitely want to continue what I'm doing. So going ahead with the teaching, and hopefully just reach as many people as possible all over the world, because sometimes I also feel like education in bird photography is not that accessible everywhere. So I really hope that I will be able to reach as many people as possible. And then my other very big goal is actually to use my photos to help conservation efforts. So
Oh,
I'm
nice.
I'm I'm really trying to bridge my scientific background, which is still there and it's still a part of me. I want to bridge that and move it more towards the conservation side, because what I think is that birds really helped me back in 2020. They were there, and they literally saved me, and they changed my life. And now I need to give back. So the first way to give back is to give back to other people, and that I do via the teaching and via sharing content on social media. But then I also just want to give back to birds, to wildlife, to nature. And the way that I think I can contribute to that is actually using my photography to share stories, to showcase which are the problems, the issues that birds face right now, and hopefully raise awareness between the people and ensure that the right actions are undertaken so nature is protected.
No, I think that's a beautiful thing to be in a few
Mm-hmm.
years. Should be
Mm-hmm.
nice. If I'm summarizing this conversation, because we're close to 80 minutes of
Mm-hmm.
talking, so it's quite a lot. But
Yes.
I'm just gonna try to summarize it.
Yes.
I think your story, regarding how do you achieve your dreams? How can you make your dreams come true? Is just by doing it. You have to try something before you know if it would work, but also you have to use your reflection and take breaks to relax and see if you're on the right path or not. And you can find yourself on the right path if you have a good work-life balance. And if you want to get somewhere, you have to invest in yourself, not only money, but also time to develop your skills. And you have to have the determination and the perseverance and making the choices to get there where you want to be. And like I said earlier, the 3 important things for you in life and regarding how can you make your dreams come true are freedom, stability, and safety. And if you do the things you have to do and make a plan and follow the plan, which can also be adapted when necessary, you can be there where you want to be. I think that's like the short summary of our conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have to, if you want to add something to that, if I've missed something in my summary.
No, I think that the summary was perfect.
Okay, that's good to hear. And then we have still one question that remains. If you talk to Chiara from like 6 years old, the younger you, what would you say to her on how she can make her dreams come true?
The thing that I would really tell her is that although she doesn't fully believe it, she's actually really, really brave. And I think that courage is what someone really needs to pursue a dream. And for a long time, I feel I wasn't brave enough. But today I'm in a new place where I think I actually am brave enough. But as a small child, maybe I wasn't believing in that. So that's what I would tell myself.
Stay brave.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for this conversation.
No, thank you to you, Paul, for having me.